Mendoza tapped his fingers on the large carved mesquite desk. The taps were in intervals of 2, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. A large grandfather clock in the corner of the office responded to the tapping with a crisp tick each second. The phone on the desk rang. "Señor Presidente?" "Yes," he answered. The tapping stopped. "I have the Secretary of the Interior for you." "Have you heard from my wife yet?" he asked in a nervous voice. "No, sir," she responded. There was a pause. President Mendoza stood up at his desk and stared down at the phone. "Sir, would you like me to tell the Secretary you're unavailable?" she asked. "No, put him through," he chirped back. "Transferring now, sir." The phone beeped. "Miguel, what is it?" Mendoza asked. "Señor Presidente, the American embassy is completely empty," answered Miguel. Mendoza inhaled deeply through his nose. "How long?" "No earlier than last night," said Miguel. Mendoza swore under his breath. "What do you want me to do?" Miguel asked. Mendoza drew a blank. Nothing came to mind. "I will tell you when I know." He pressed the button to end the call. Behind the desk were double doors that led to a large balcony. Mendoza turned around and gazed through the glass at the horizon. Usually, this time of day, the sun was shining through horizontally, a last shimmer of warm orange beams before the tranquility of the evening arrived. Today was different. The sun was more like a burning coal, smoldering in a thick haze of smog. Outside of the gates of the presidential palace, crowds of people amassed. Mendoza couldn't see them, but he could hear their chants. "Ni comer ni vivir tiene que ir." A rhyme that loosely translates to, "We're unable to eat, even live, so he needs to go." It wasn't simply a call for his resignation. It was a call for sacrifice. It was their life or his. The chant had lost its effect on Mendoza a few days ago. Now it was simply white noise in the background. A reminder that the people must be handled. One more thing to do. Outside of the presidential palace perimeter wall, funnels of smoke dotted the cityscape as gray plumes fed the hazy orange sky. Gazing the view, Mendoza's eyes soared over the wall, over the city, and into the distant green jungle that surrounded them. From where he stood, it was the epicenter of chaos and unrest. But just outside the city was peace as far as the eye could see, the quiet harmony of where the land meets the sky. He wondered where out there his wife was. Then he snapped out of his trance and pressed the button on his phone to make a call. "Yes, Señor Presidente," said his secretary. Before she could even finish the greeting, he spoke. "Have you reached my wife yet?" "Not yet, sir. Have you tried every number?" "Yes, sir. And called her sister as well?" "Yes, sir. No answer." "Please keep trying." "Yes, sir," she said. He ended the call. The office was stuffy. There was no fresh air. The wood panel walls looked dry and stale. Mendoza opened the double glass doors. The smell of burnt tires instantly permeated his nose and dove into his lungs. He looked down from his office balcony, perched 60 feet over the presidential court. The colonial Spanish courtyard that stretched from the presidential palace, where he stood, to the perimeter wall was empty, clean, and calm. Outside of that perimeter wall, a thunderous crowd of protesters pressed up against it. Armed troops blocked each potential access point in the wall, like patched cracks on a dam about to burst. A flood could explode through any second, or maybe the wall would hold another night. Mendoza leaned onto the balcony rail with both hands. "These goddamn ungrateful parasites. Animals," he muttered. "I gave them everything I could, and it wasn't enough." His face twisted with anger and disgust. The phone rang. "Señor Presidente, I have General Torres on the line," said his secretary in her soothing voice. "Yes, put him through." "Transferring now, sir." Señor Presidente, Torres started. Mendoza cut him off. Have you found my wife yet? No, sir, but rest assured we will. Listen, I need her here as soon as possible, before nightfall. Yes, I understand, responded Torres. Oh, do you? Listen, we're ending this disaster before dark. The second that my wife is in my office, I want these troops to make an example. An example? Asked Torres. Yes, order the troops to shoot anyone and everyone that touches the perimeter wall, Mendoza insisted. Señor Presidente, an unprovoked attack on civilians. Torres' voice was defensive. Mendoza chimed in. Then put a soldier in plain clothes and have him shoot in the air from the crowd. Your troops will fire back in defense. But sir, Torres' tone was polite but disagreeing. Damn it, do I have to tell you how to do your job? These animals will not stop until we show force. This is a presidential order. Yes, sir, Torres agreed in submission. What about my security? Asked Mendoza. I already have 2 of my best men outside your office. They're sitting by your secretary. No one will get past them. Find my wife and bring her here. Wait until she's with me before you do anything. Once she's safe, carry out my order. Yes, sir. Mendoza hung up. Droplets of sweat had fallen on his desk during the call. The double doors were still open. The humidity and smell of burnt tires had now filled his entire office. He reached for the cigar box on his desk, then stopped. Instead, he opened a drawer, grabbed an old pack of cigarettes, and lit up. With the cigarette resting between his fingers, he leaned over and pressed the button on his phone. Yes, Señor Presidente? Asked the secretary. We need to call every contact we have from the U.S. Embassy and Secretary of State's office. Yes, sir, she answered. He sat down and took a long drag from his cigarette. Smoke slowly escaped from his nose and mouth. Mendoza's phone rang. Señor Presidente, I have Ambassador John Henrik on the line for you, said the secretary. Mendoza jammed his cigarette into the ashtray. Transfer him, he ordered without hesitation. The phone beeped. Mendoza started. John, where the hell are you? I'm home, Mr. Mendoza, answered John in a plain tone. What's going on? Why did you evacuate the U.S. Embassy? You know why. The United States no longer recognizes your administration. John, you must be kidding me. Look, Mr. Mendoza, there's a global order far bigger than both of us. If they ask us for a favor, you don't say no. How many times did I tell you to listen? Now we have to both live with the consequences of your decision. Mendoza's face turned red with rage. You think you can come to my country and tell me how to do my job? I'm the president of Cortesia. You are just some American campaign donor sent here like an errand boy. John interrupted. Mendoza, this is goodbye. The phone clicked, and there was a dial tone. Mendoza slammed his fist on the desk. He wiped the beads of sweat on his forehead back into his neatly combed hair. The sun was nearly setting. It would be dark soon. Another night of chanting, fires, destruction, and sleeplessness. He wondered what would happen if the troops attacked before his wife was back. No, that's crazy, he thought. There was no way he would risk his wife's safety. Mendoza stood up. He began pacing. He mumbled to himself as he walked back and forth, replaying all the events that led to this point. How did this happen so fast, he wondered. 2 weeks ago, everything was normal. Something changed overnight. The Cortesian peso's value plummeted. Prices rose. Shelves went empty. The news blamed him. Then everyone blamed him. How did this nightmare begin? How can it end? Mana would know, he thought. Mendoza's mind was racing. His heart was racing. Where is she? He asked out loud. Just then, the door handle between his office and the secretary's anteroom clicked open. Mana peeked in. Mendoza felt a cool rush of relief. Mi amor, Where have you been? I've had everyone looking for you. Listen, we're staying in here tonight. Watch, we're going to teach these animals a lesson." "Enough," Mana said as the door swung all the way open. Mendoza's face went from a giddy smile to a look of confusion. She continued as she slowly walked toward him. "I'm so tired of cleaning up after every mess you make. You caused all this, you." "But mi amor, what do you mean?" He was genuinely puzzled. "Everyone warned you. Everyone told you what to do to keep the order, and you wouldn't listen. You were stubborn. Even I told you to do as you're told, but you still didn't listen." Mendoza's face started to get a defensive look to it. "Yes, I'm the president. It's my decision in the end." "Was the president," Mana corrected him. Mendoza's eyes squinted as he tried to make sense of what was going on. "Guards!" yelled Mana. The 2 guards standing outside of the president's office came through the door and walked swiftly toward Mendoza. "What's going on?" Mana just stood in the middle of the office, watching as the guards grabbed Mendoza and bent him over the desk. "Stop! I said stop! I'm your president!" he yelled. One guard pulled Mendoza's arms behind his back while the other handcuffed his wrists. "You can't arrest me! Get off me! Mana, get them off me!" Mendoza yelled, with his face pressed against the desk and hands cuffed behind him. "You aren't being arrested," Mana said in a low voice. The anteroom outside the presidential office was beginning to fill with soldiers. "Release me now!" screamed Mendoza. The 2 guards, one on each side, grabbed him by his elbows and drug him through the double doors to the balcony. Mendoza resisted. His feet dragged as he tried to anchor himself with the limp legs. "Open the gates!" Mana yelled. Her command was echoed from room to room, hallway to hallway. People yelled, "Open the gates!" all throughout the presidential palace. Large colonial gates that protected the grounds of the presidential fortress began to open. Gates that were once built to keep enemy forces outside of the massive wall surrounding the presidential palace. This was the break in the dam, and an ocean of people began to pour through. Mendoza was speechless at the horror of this sight. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice behind him. A man's voice. It was General Torres. Mendoza yelled over his shoulder, "Torres, call these people off of me. Mana's been compromised." He tried to look back, but was firmly gripped by the 2 guards. He wanted to see their faces, but was still pointed toward the balcony. Both Torres and Mana approached from behind. They were both silent. The presidential courtyard was now full. It was crammed by thousands of people. Some chanted, some held torches, some threw trash and rocks toward the balcony. It was a true mob, a swarm of locusts that had one mission: to advance and devour. Torres and Mana stepped up alongside Mendoza and the guards. They flanked the fallen president on the balcony and looked over the sea of people. Mendoza, struggling to form words, repeated, "Mana, what are you doing?" Torres handed Mana a rope. She raised it in the air. Cheering erupted from the massive crowd. A new chant began, 3 syllables, "Cuélgalo," hang him. Mana began to wrap the rope around Mendoza's neck as he thrashed furiously in defiance. It was no use. The 2 guards held him by his arms while his hands were bound behind him. Mendoza looked in Mana's eyes, but she didn't look back. Her eyes were fixed on the rope as she caringly looped it around his neck multiple times. "Sit him on the edge," Mana said to Torres and the guards. Mendoza was lifted and seated on the thick stone railing. He looked down at the people and tried to see at least one of their greedy little faces. These were the piranhas that ate whatever he fed them, but still wanted more. Now his carcass was the latest offering. The sun had just set, and the pastel-colored afternoon sky was now just a small orange ember in a dark abyss. The crowd was a fluid shadow. Torres tied the end of the rope to one of the Baroque pillars on the edge of the balcony. "He is ready, Señora Presidenta," Torres said to Mana. Mendoza couldn't believe his ears. Señora Presidenta? It was the missing piece of the puzzle. Mana had been different lately, distant, and hard to find. This was it. This is how the attempted coup would end. Mana would take the crown from the beheaded king. The other end of the rope, attached to the pillar, rested firmly around Mendoza's neck. Resolved to his inevitable fate, Mendoza slouched on the balcony wall. His legs playfully dangled like a kid on a tall chair. The chanting grew louder. "Cuélgalo." Mana moved behind Mendoza, lifted her right leg, and rested her shoe on his back. More cheering roared through the crowd. The sound was amplified by the surrounding walls and shook the buildings. Mendoza looked to the horizon, beyond the perimeter wall, beyond the sparkling lights of the city, beyond the fading outline of distant mountains that towered over the jungle. He stared into the imminent dark of the arriving night sky. Where he sat, he was bound, but out there was freedom, an escape from this fate almost in reach, but infinitely distant. With a swift thrust, Mana extended her leg. The slack in the rope jerked tight. Mendoza's lifeless body gently swung back and forth just below the balcony, his crooked neck and bulging eyes still fixed on the horizon.